The stars were dying one by one across the outer rim systems, and Captain Jake Morrison knew exactly who was killing them. The emergency beacon from Kepler 442 had been silent for 3 days now, but the last transmission still echoed in his mind like a death song. 20 million colonists had called that system home, working the vast agricultural platforms that fed half the sector. Now there was nothing but empty space and radiation signatures, where their worlds used to be. Jake stood on the bridge of the New Haven, watching the tactical display paint a picture of devastation that stretched across 12 star systems. Each red marker represented a colony that had gone dark in the past month. Each one meant millions of human lives snuffed out like candles in a hurricane. The pattern was clear and terrifying in its efficiency. The Zephyrian Galactic Armada was carving through human space like a blade through paper. "Captain, we're receiving." "Another distress signal," reported Communications Officer Betty Adams from her station. Her voice carried the weight of someone who had heard too many final messages lately. "It's from the mining stations in the Proxima Belt." Jake nodded grimly. He already knew what they would hear. The same story that had played out across 11 other systems. The miners would describe massive alien ships appearing without warning, their quantum phase weapons slicing through defensive platforms like they were made of soap bubbles. There would be desperate pleas for help, maybe a few minutes of confused combat reports, then silence. The recording crackled to life across the bridge speakers. "This is Proxima Station Alpha to any human vessels in range. We have multiple bogies. Incoming count unknown. They're huge, bigger than anything in our databases. Our defense grid is charging weapons, but I don't think it's going to matter. These things are the size of cities, and there are dozens of them." A pause filled with static and the distant sound of alarms. Then the voice returned, higher now with panic. "They're firing. Dear God, they're cutting right through our shields like they're not even there. Station Beta just ... It's gone. Just gone. If anyone receives this, tell Earth that we tried. Tell them that humanity doesn't surrender, even when..." The transmission cut to white noise. Jake closed his eyes for a moment, adding another few thousand names to the growing list of the dead in his memory. When he opened them again, his tactical Officer Lieutenant Amy Parker was studying the sensor readings with the focused intensity of someone trying to solve an impossible puzzle. "Captain, based on the attack patterns and timeline, I'm calculating the Zephyrian fleet at roughly 3,000 vessels," she said without looking up from her console. "Their movement patterns suggest a command structure with multiple Dreadnought-class ships supported by destroyer and frigate screens. They're using standard formation tactics, but with overwhelming firepower superiority. 3,000 ships." Jake repeated slowly. The number felt heavy in his mouth. The entire human colonial defense fleet in this sector consisted of maybe 30 vessels, most of them converted cargo haulers with military-grade weapons bolted on as an afterthought. Even if Earth's main battle fleet weren't tied up in the Andromedan territorial dispute, they would be facing odds that made victory impossible through conventional means. "Commander," Lisa Grant appeared on the main screen via quantum link from her command post on New Geneva Station. Her face showed the strain of someone who had been running combat calculations for weeks without sleep. Behind her, staff officers moved with the urgent efficiency of people preparing for the end of the world. "Jake, I'm uploading our latest intelligence." "Reports to your navigation computer," Lisa said. "The Zephyrian Armada isn't just conquering our colonies. They're sterilizing them. No survivors, no negotiations, no prisoners. Complete extinction appears to be their operational goal." Jake felt his jaw clench. "What about evacuation protocols? Can we get our people out?" "Not enough ships, not enough time," Lisa replied. "The Zephyrians are moving faster than our projection models anticipated. Based on their current vector and speed, They'll reach the core colonial systems within 2 weeks. After that, it's a straight line to Earth. The bridge fell silent except for the steady hum of the New Haven's engines. Jake looked around at his crew, seeing his own thoughts reflected in their faces. They were good people, experienced spacers, who had signed up to protect human colonies from pirates and smugglers. None of them had expected to face the extinction of their entire species. "There is one option," Lisa continued, her voice carefully neutral. "The USS Independence is currently stationed at Titan 7. She's been running extended trials and modifications for the past 2 years under Captain Sam Rodriguez." Jake knew about the Independence, though mostly through rumors and scattered reports. The ship was an experimental hybrid design, combining salvaged alien technology with human engineering in ways that made traditional naval architects nervous. Some called it humanity's most advanced warship. Others called it a death trap held together by spare parts and wishful thinking. "One ship against 3,000? Amy asked from her station. "Rodriguez has been developing new tactical doctrines, specifically for asymmetric warfare scenarios," Lisa explained. "His crew includes specialists in xenotechnology, asteroid mining, and what intelligence calls creative combat engineering. If anyone can find a way to hurt the Zephyrians, it's them." Jake studied the tactical display again, watching the red. Markers spread like an infection across the star map. Conventional wisdom said that one ship, no matter how advanced, couldn't possibly stand against an armada that had crushed entire planetary defense networks. But conventional wisdom had also said that humans would never leave their home solar system. And look how that had turned out. "What kind of modifications has Rodriguez been making to his ship?" Jake asked. Lisa's expression shifted slightly. "The way it did when she was accessing classified information. Officially, routine systems upgrades and crew training exercises. Unofficially, he's been preparing for exactly this scenario. The Independence has been equipped with experimental weapon systems, modified shielding, and what the engineers call adaptive tactical capabilities. The details are above my clearance level, but the test results suggest they've found ways to make human technology competitive with alien systems. By using alien technology against itself? By using human ingenuity to turn alien advantages into disadvantages," Lisa corrected. "Rodriguez's philosophy is that every advanced system has exploitable weaknesses. The more sophisticated the technology, the more ways it can be broken by someone who thinks differently about the problem." Jake nodded slowly. It was a typically human approach to warfare. When faced with superior enemies, humans had always found ways to level the playing field through cunning, adaptation, and sheer bloody-minded refusal to accept defeat. From David facing Goliath with a sling to colonial militias fighting professional armies with guerrilla tactics, humanity's greatest victories had come from turning conventional military wisdom on its head. The question was whether those same principles could work in the vast emptiness of space against an enemy with technology centuries ahead of human science. In less than 2 weeks, they would find out if one human battleship could accomplish what entire fleets had failed to do. Stars were dying, but humanity wasn't ready to join them in the darkness. The Zephyrian Galactic Armada dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Titan 7 system, like a swarm of metal predators emerging from the void. Admiral Kethfar stood on the command deck of his flagship, the Eternal Dominion, watching his tactical displays paint the local space with thousands of sensor contacts. 3,000 warships had answered his call to battle, each one a masterpiece of Zephyrian military engineering that had never known defeat. The sight before him was almost disappointing in its simplicity. One human vessel hung in the shadow of the largest asteroid in the system's mining belt, looking as insignificant as a minnow facing a school of sharks. Long-range sensors measured the enemy ship at roughly 800 meters in length, barely 1/10 the size of his smallest dreadnought. The humans had positioned their pathetic excuse for a battleship behind a cluster of spinning rocks, as if hoping the debris would somehow protect them from the coming storm. "Admiral, the human vessel is broadcasting on standard diplomatic frequencies," reported his communications officer, a young Zephyrian whose scales still held the bright colors of inexperience. "They are requesting parley under galactic warfare conventions." Kethver's mandibles clicked in what his species considered mild amusement. Humans always seemed to believe that talking could solve problems that only superior firepower could address. In the past month, he had received similar requests from colony governors, defense coordinators, and fleet commanders. Each conversation had ended the same way, with human voices pleading for mercy that would never come. Ignore their transmission. He ordered, "Deploy the fleet in standard assault formation. I want those humans to see exactly how insignificant they are before we erase them from existence." The Zephyrian Armada began its deadly dance across the star system, 3 massive command ships taking position at the center, while concentric rings of destroyers and frigates spread outward like the petals of a metal flower. Each vessel bristled with quantum phase cannons capable of punching through planetary crusts, shielding arrays that could deflect the output of entire solar flares, and targeting computers that could track a grain of sand moving at relativistic speeds. On the bridge of the USS Independence, Captain Sam Rodriguez watched the alien deployment with the calm focus of a chess master studying his opponent's opening move. His ship might look small compared to the approaching armada, but appearances could be deceiving. For 2 years, his crew had been modifying every system on their vessel, turning a conventional human battleship into something the galaxy had never seen before. "Enemy fleet is assuming attack formation," reported Lieutenant Amy Parker from her tactical station, her fingers dancing across holographic controls that displayed the Zephyrian positions in 3 dimensions. "Count is confirmed at 3,000 vessels, including what appears to be 12 Dreadnought-class command ships." Rodriguez nodded calmly. "Danny, how are our engines looking?" Chief Engineer Danny Walsh grinned from his position at the engineering console, his hands already working to bring their modified fusion reactors to full power. "All systems green, Captain. The new power couplings are holding steady, and our thrust-to-mass ratio is about 30% higher than standard specs. She's not pretty, but this old girl is ready to dance." The Independence was indeed not pretty by conventional standards. Where other human warships followed clean lines and military aesthetics, Rodriguez's vessel looked like it had been assembled by enthusiastic scavengers with access to alien technology. Hull plates from a dozen different manufacturers created a patchwork exterior, while weapon systems that had never been designed to work together somehow functioned in perfect harmony. "Amy, what's our tactical situation looking like?" Rodriguez asked. "The Zephyrians are playing this by the book," she replied, studying the enemy formation with professional interest. "They're assuming we'll try to run or make a desperate charge at their command ships. Their positioning is designed to create overlapping fields of fire that would turn any conventional attack into suicide." "Good thing we're not conventional," Rodriguez said with a slight smile. "Ellen, are you ready with our navigation plan?" Navigation Officer Ellen Martinez looked up from her console with the expression of someone who had spent weeks calculating impossible trajectories through gravitational chaos. "Ready as I'll ever be, Captain. The asteroid field's rotation patterns are locked into our computer, and I've plotted 17 different escape routes through debris clusters that should confuse their targeting systems." 17 routes, Rodriguez repeated. "How many of them have better than 50% survival?" "Odds? 3, sir." "I like those numbers," Rodriguez said. "Karen, open a channel to the crew." Communications Officer Karen Wells activated the ship-wide intercom system, her equipment modified to broadcast on frequencies that could penetrate the electromagnetic interference generated by the asteroid field's mineral content. Throughout the Independence, 847 humans stopped what they were doing to listen to their captain's words. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking," Rodriguez began, his voice carrying the easy confidence of someone who had faced impossible odds before and lived to tell about it. "In about 10 minutes, we're going to engage an enemy force that outnumbers us 3,000 to 1. They have better weapons, stronger shields, and technology that makes our best equipment look like stone tools." He paused, looking around at his bridge crew and seeing determination rather than fear in their faces. "But they made one critical mistake," he continued. "They assumed that fighting humans would be like fighting every other species in the galaxy. They expect us to follow their rules, use their tactics, and die quietly when outmatched by superior firepower. They're about to learn why that assumption has gotten aliens in trouble for the past 3 centuries. On the Zephyrian flagship, Admiral, Kethver watched his weapons officers begin charging the quantum phase cannon arrays. Each gun contained enough destructive force to crack a moon in half, and his fleet carried thousands of them. The mathematics of the coming battle were simple and brutal. No ship in the galaxy could survive the concentrated firepower he was about to unleash. "All vessels report ready for combat," announced his tactical coordinator. "Target acquisition is complete. The human vessel remains stationary behind the asteroid cluster. Fire when ready," Kethver ordered. 1 full volley should be sufficient to vaporize their ship and everything within 1,000 kilometers of it. The first salvo from the Zephyrian Armada lit up space with the fury of an artificial star going nova. Quantum phase beams lanced across the void with enough combined energy to glass the surface of a small planet, converging on the position where their sensors had detected the human battleship. The asteroid cluster exploded in a brilliant flash of superheated rock and metal vapor, creating an expanding cloud of debris that glowed white-hot against the darkness. For a moment, Admiral Kethver allowed himself to feel satisfaction at another quick victory. Then his sensor operators began reporting readings that made no sense. "Admiral, we're detecting engine signatures moving through the debris cloud," came the confused report. "The human vessel appears to be intact and accelerating." Kethver. Mandibles snapped together in surprise. Impossible. Nothing could survive that barrage. "Sir, the human ship is emerging from the asteroid field," his tactical officer reported with growing alarm. "They're moving at velocities that exceed our projection models for vessels of their size." The Independence burst from the expanding cloud of vaporized rock like a predator emerging from cover, its hull scarred but intact, engines burning with the blue-white fire of overcharged fusion reactors. The human battleship had been exactly where the Zephyrian sensors indicated, but it had also been somewhere else entirely when their weapons fired. Rodriguez stood on his bridge, watching the enemy fleet's formation begin to shift as confused. Alien commanders tried to understand what had just happened. "Now that we have their attention," he said calmly, "let's show them what humans do when someone tries to exterminate us." The Independence moved through space like a dancer, performing steps that no choreographer had ever written, using the gravitational pull of spinning asteroids to change direction in ways that made alien targeting computers struggle to keep up. Rodriguez watched his navigation display show impossible flight paths as Ellen Martinez threaded their ship through gaps in the debris field that seemed too narrow for anything larger than a fighter craft. "Danny, I need everything you can give me from those engines," Rodriguez called to his chief engineer, who was already pushing their fusion reactors beyond every safety limit ever written into human engineering manuals. "You've got it, Captain," Walsh replied, his hands flying over controls that monitored power systems running at 140% of their designed capacity. "The new plasma conduits are holding, but we're generating heat signatures that would cook." A normal crew. Good thing we've been training in environmental suits for the past 6 months. The Zephyrian fleet began adjusting their formation, trying to box in the human ship with overlapping fields of fire, but Rodriguez had spent 2 years studying their tactical doctrines. Every alien species in the galaxy fought space battles the same way, using massive formations to concentrate firepower while relying on superior technology to overwhelm their enemies. It was efficient, logical, and completely predictable. "Amy, launch the mining charges," Rodriguez ordered, watching as his tactical officer triggered the release of what appeared to be humanity's most primitive weapons against the galaxy's most. Advanced Fleet. Lieutenant Commander Nick Thompson looked up from his weapons console with a grin that would have worried anyone who knew him well. "Sir, are we really going to attack alien dreadnoughts with mining explosives?" "We're going to attack them with physics," Rodriguez corrected. "The explosives are just the delivery system." Dozens of simple chemical charges spread out from the Independence like seeds scattered by the wind, each one following a carefully calculated trajectory through the asteroid field. To the Zephyrian commanders, watching from their massive ships, the human weapons looked like toys compared to their quantum phase cannons. The charges were barely larger than shuttlecraft and contained less explosive power than a single shot. From their smallest point defense guns, Admiral Kethvar studied the tactical display on his flagship with growing confusion. What are the humans attempting to accomplish with those primitive devices? His weapons officer, a veteran of 100 campaigns across the galaxy, shook his head in puzzlement. "Unknown, Admiral. The explosive yield of those charges would barely scratch our hull plating. Perhaps they are hoping to obscure our sensors with debris clouds?" The mining charges detonated in sequence across the asteroid field, each explosion precisely timed to fracture the spinning rocks along their natural stress lines. What had been dozens of house-sized asteroids suddenly became thousands of fragments, moving in unpredictable directions. The Zephyrian shields, designed to deflect energy weapons and absorb the impact of conventional projectiles, found themselves dealing with something their creators had never anticipated: rocks the size of ground. Cars began hammering against alien hull plating with the force of artillery shells. The Zephyrian shields could handle the impacts individually, but the sheer volume of debris created cascading power drains across their defensive systems. Warning alarms began sounding throughout the alien fleet as shield generators started cycling, offline to prevent overload damage. "Brilliant," Amy whispered from her tactical station, watching the enemy formation begin to lose cohesion as captains tried to maneuver their ships away from the worst of the debris storm. "We turned their own, positioning against them. They packed their ships so tight that they can't dodge the rocks without running into each other." Rodriguez nodded, but his attention was already focused on the next phase of their attack plan. "Nick, are the railguns ready?" Thompson's hands moved across his weapons console like a pianist playing a deadly symphony. "All batteries charged and locked on to priority targets, Captain. The gravitational assist calculations are loaded into the targeting computer." The Independence carried 6 railguns, each one a masterpiece of human magnetic acceleration technology that could launch a tungsten projectile at significant fractions of light speed. By themselves, the weapons were powerful, but limited by their ammunition capacity and recharge time. However, Danny Walsh had spent months modifying the guns to take advantage of something no other species had ever considered using as a tactical advantage. "Fire," Rodriguez ordered. The railgun rounds streaked across space at velocities that strained the limits of Zephyrian tracking systems. But their true genius wasn't in their speed. Each projectile had been launched along a trajectory that took it past 3 different asteroids, using the gravitational pull of each rock to alter its course in ways that made interception nearly impossible. What appeared to be 6 simple shots became 18 different attack vectors as the rounds ricocheted off gravitational fields like billiard balls bouncing off invisible cushions. The first Zephyrian destroyer died when a tungsten rod, accelerated by both human technology and celestial mechanics, punched through its weakened shields and detonated inside its reactor core. The ship's death was spectacular, sending a chain reaction through the alien formation as neighboring vessels were caught in the expanding plasma cloud. Direct hit on enemy vessel designation Alpha 7, Amy reported with professional calm that barely concealed her excitement. Secondary explosions detected. Target is breaking up. But Rodriguez wasn't watching the dying destroyer. His attention was focused on the ripple effect spreading through the Zephyrian formation as captains tried to maintain their assault patterns while dealing with gravitational debris, unexpected weapon trajectories, and the growing realization that they were fighting an enemy who didn't follow any of the established rules of space warfare. "Ellen, take us through the gamma debris field," he ordered. "Maximum burn." The Independence dove toward a cluster of asteroids that any sane pilot would have avoided, using the gravitational chaos to mask their heat signature while positioning for their next attack. The ship's hull groaned under the stress of rapid course changes, but the crew had trained for exactly these conditions. "Captain, the aliens are adapting their formation," Amy reported. "They're spreading out to minimize collision risks and adjusting their shield frequencies to better handle kinetic impacts." "Good," Rodriguez replied. "That means they're starting to take us seriously. Karen, are our friends ready?" "Communications." Officer Karen Wells smiled as she activated a series of encrypted transmissions that had been broadcasting throughout the battle. "All cargo vessels report ready for Phase 2, Captain. They're standing by for your signal." Admiral Kethfer watched, his tactical display with growing frustration as his perfectly organized battle formation dissolved into chaos. The humans had turned what should have been a simple extermination into something resembling a three-dimensional puzzle where every move created new problems. His fleet still held overwhelming advantages in firepower and numbers, but those advantages were becoming harder to bring to bear against an enemy that refused to fight like a proper military force. "All vessels, tighten defensive screens and prepare for coordinated bombardment," he ordered. "I want that human ship reduced to component atoms." But even as his commanders acknowledged the order, Kethvar found himself wondering what other surprises the humans might have prepared. In 30 years of military service, he had never encountered an enemy that seemed to view physics itself as a weapon system. On the Independence, Rodriguez watched 3 new contacts appear on his sensors as the cargo vessels that had been hiding behind Titan 7 began their approach runs. To any observer, they looked like civilian ships fleeing the battle zone. Only Rodriguez and his crew knew what those vessels were actually carrying in their cargo holds. "Phase 2 is go," he announced to his bridge crew. "Let's show these aliens what happens when you underestimate human engineering." The 3 cargo vessels approaching from behind Titan 7 looked like ordinary civilian ships fleeing a battle zone, their transponders broadcasting standard merchant identification codes and emergency evacuation signals. Admiral Kethfor's tactical officers barely registered them as threats, dismissing the vessels as refugees seeking escape from the combat area. This assumption would prove to be their second major mistake of the day. Captain Rodriguez watched the cargo ships on his tactical display, knowing that each vessel carried something no alien species had ever used as a weapon of war. For months, Danny Walsh and his engineering teams had been working with the industrial fabrication facilities on Titan 7, converting thousands of mining drones, construction robots, and maintenance mechs into something the galaxy had never seen before. "Cargo vessel Hudson Bay is in position," reported Karen Wells from her communication station. "Captain Morrison confirms his payload is ready for deployment." "Tell him to light the candle," Rodriguez replied. using the code phrase they had rehearsed dozens of times during their secret preparations. The Hudson Bay opened its cargo doors and began releasing what appeared to be a cloud of mechanical insects. Into space, thousands of small robotic units spread out from the ship like a swarm of metal locusts, each one no larger than a human torso, but equipped with cutting tools, welding equipment, and simple guidance systems that had been programmed with one basic instruction. What are those devices supposed to accomplish? Admiral Kethver demanded as his sensors detected the approaching swarm. They appear to be civilian maintenance robots. His tactical officer studied the readings with growing alarm. Admiral, there are over 5,000 individual units in that swarm, and they're accelerating toward our formation. Their programming appears to be focused on attachment and dismantlement protocols. The Zephyrian point defense systems opened fire on the approaching drones. Their precision laser arrays designed to intercept missiles and fighter craft. But the defensive weapons had been calibrated for targets that followed predictable flight paths and presented consistent profiles for targeting. The maintenance drones moved like a living thing, each unit following slightly different trajectories, while the swarm as a whole flowed around defensive fire like water, finding its way through cracks in a dam. The first drones reached the outer screen of Zephyrian destroyers and immediately began doing what they had been designed to do for decades in the mining facilities of human space. They attached themselves to hull plating, identified structural weak points, and began systematically taking apart everything they could reach. Armor that could withstand direct hits from capital ship weapons proved surprisingly vulnerable too. Small cutting tools applied with mechanical precision over extended periods. Sir, we are receiving damage reports from the entire outer formation, the Zephyrian communications officer announced with barely concealed panic. The mechanical units are breaching hull integrity on multiple vessels. They appear to be targeting power conduits, sensor arrays, and weapon systems. But the drone swarm was only part of Rodriguez's plan. While the aliens focused on the immediate threat of having their ships slowly disassembled by mechanical parasites, Dr. Paul Evans was implementing the most sophisticated aspect of their attack strategy from his position at the Independence's science station. Captain, I'm detecting the quantum entangled processors that control the targeting systems. Evans reported, his fingers dancing across controls that monitored electromagnetic frequencies across multiple spectrums. Their computer systems are more advanced than anything we've ever built, but they're also more fragile when exposed to specific interference patterns. Evans had spent weeks analyzing fragments of Zephyrian technology recovered from previous battles, discovering that alien computer systems relied on quantum-entangled particles that maintained perfect synchronization across vast distances. It was an elegant solution that allowed instantaneous communication and calculation speeds that human technology couldn't match. It also created a critical vulnerability that no alien engineer had ever considered: broadcasting interference pattern Charlie 7 on all frequencies. Evans announced, the signal that spread out from the Independence was barely detectable by conventional sensors, but its effect on the Zephyrian fleet was immediate and devastating. Targeting computers that had been tracking hundreds of objects simultaneously began reporting conflicting data. Navigation systems started calculating impossible positions. Communication networks that had operated flawlessly for decades suddenly found themselves unable to maintain coherent data streams. All vessels report major system malfunctions, came the increasingly desperate voice of Admiral Kethvar's communications officer. Targeting computers are offline across 60% of the fleet. Navigation systems are showing random error cascades. The Admiral stared at his tactical display as his perfectly coordinated armada began to fall apart before his eyes. Ships that had maintained precise formations for months were drifting out of position as their navigation systems fed them incorrect data. Weapons that could destroy planets were useless without functional targeting computers. The technological superiority that had made his fleet unstoppable was being turned against itself by an enemy that seemed to understand Zephyrian systems better than their own engineers. How are they doing this? He demanded before anyone could. Answer: Security Chief Tony Garcia was leading the third phase of the human attack plan. Modified mining suits launched from hidden compartments in the Independence's hull, each one carrying a human volunteer, equipped with improvised weapons and enough determination to board alien vessels that had never been designed to repel individual attackers. The Zephyrians had built their ships to withstand assaults from other capital vessels, with armor thick enough to resist quantum phase cannons and shields capable of deflecting planet-killing weapons. But they had never considered the possibility that individual enemies might try to cut their way inside, using nothing more than portable fusion torches and explosive charges carried in backpacks. Garcia and his teams didn't try to capture the alien ships or engage their crews in combat. Instead, they targeted critical systems with the methodical efficiency of professional saboteurs. A few well-placed charges in a reactor control room could cripple a dreadnought. A fusion torch applied to the right power conduit could blind an entire sensor array. By the time the alien crews realized they were being boarded, the damage was already done. Multiple hull breaches detected across the formation, reported the Zephyrian tactical officer, his voice rising with each new status update. Internal. Explosions on ships Eternal Glory, Star Crusher, and Void Hunter. We're losing primary systems across the entire fleet. Admiral Kethvar watched his invincible armada transform into a collection of drifting hulks and damaged vessels struggling to maintain basic life support. In less than an hour, a single human battleship had accomplished what should have been impossible. They had turned his fleet's greatest strengths into fatal weaknesses. The Independence continued its deadly dance through the asteroid field, using gravitational assists and debris clouds to stay ahead of the increasingly desperate alien attempts to destroy it. But Rodriguez knew that the real victory wasn't being won by his ship alone. It was being achieved by thousands of small robotic units, precisely targeted electromagnetic interference, and a handful of humans in mining suits who had turned the most advanced military technology in the galaxy into a liability. Admiral Kethvar is requesting communication, Karen Wells announced from her station. Rodriguez smiled grimly. Put him on screen. I think it's time we had a conversation about the future of this sector. Admiral Kethvar appeared on the main screen of the Independence, his scaled features showing an expression that Rodriguez had never seen on an alien face before. It wasn't anger or hatred, or even the cold calculation that usually marked Zephyrian military commanders. It was something much more unsettling for a species that had conquered half the galaxy through superior technology and overwhelming force. It was confusion mixed with what humans might recognize as respect. Captain Rodriguez, the alien admiral, began, his voice carrying through the translation systems with unusual formality. I am Admiral Kethvar of the Zephyrian Galactic Armada. In 30 years of military service across 47 star systems, I have never encountered tactical methods like those your species employs. Rodriguez leaned back in his captain's chair, studying the alien commander while around him his bridge. Crew continued monitoring the chaos they had created throughout the enemy fleet. Damaged Zephyrian vessels drifted in slowly expanding patterns as their crews struggled to regain control of systems that had been methodically sabotaged by forces they still didn't fully understand. Admiral, I appreciate the compliment, Rodriguez replied with the calm tone of someone discussing weather patterns rather than a battle that had cost thousands of alien lives. But I should point out that everything we've done today uses technology and tactics that humans have been developing for centuries. We just adapted them for space warfare. The Zephyrian admiral's mandibles clicked in what might have been disbelief. You turned our own technological superiority against us, using primitive mining equipment and civilian maintenance robots. Your weapons appear to be based on magnetic acceleration principles that our ancestors abandoned millennia ago. How is this possible? Because you made the same mistake that every advanced civilization makes when they encounter humans, Rodriguez explained, gesturing toward his tactical display where the remaining functional Zephyrian ships were trying to regroup into defensive formations. You assumed that newer technology is always better technology. You forgot that sometimes the best solution to a complex problem is a simple one applied in ways nobody expects. Dr. Paul Evans looked up from his science station where he was monitoring the electromagnetic interference patterns still wreaking havoc on alien computer systems. Captain, their quantum processors are starting to adapt to our interference signals. I estimate we have maybe 20 minutes before they develop effective countermeasures. Rodriguez nodded, then turned his attention back to Admiral Kethfer. Admiral, I'm going to be direct with you, because I think you're smart enough to understand the situation you're facing. Your armada came here expecting to exterminate another human colony. Instead, you've lost over 400 ships to tactics that we developed using spare parts and industrial equipment. The alien commander's expression darkened, but he didn't interrupt. Now you have a choice, Rodriguez continued. You can continue this battle and lose the rest of your fleet to methods you don't understand and can't effectively counter. Or you can accept that humanity isn't going to be as easy to exterminate as you thought. You speak of choices, Admiral. Kethfor replied, his voice carrying undertones that the translation system rendered as bitter amusement. But you command a single vessel against an armada. Even damaged, my remaining ships outnumber you by thousands to one. That's true, Rodriguez. Agreed. But those thousands of ships are now operating with degraded systems, reduced coordination, and crews who have learned that their supposedly invincible technology can be defeated by humans, using what you consider primitive methods. More importantly, Admiral, this isn't the only human battleship in the galaxy. The lie came easily, delivered with the confidence of someone who had spent his career bluffing opponents into making strategic mistakes. In reality, the Independence was unique, a one-off experimental vessel that represented humanity's best. Attempt at building something capable of fighting advanced alien technology. But Admiral Kethfer didn't know that, and Rodriguez had no intention of enlightening him. You're suggesting that your species has more vessels like this one? The alien. Admiral asked, his scaled features showing signs of what humans might recognize as worry. I'm suggesting that what you've seen today represents standard human tactical doctrine when facing technologically superior enemies, Rodriguez replied smoothly. We don't try to build better weapons than our opponents. We find ways to make their better weapons irrelevant. Lieutenant Amy Parker caught Rodriguez's eye from her tactical station, pointing to readings that showed Zephyrian ships beginning to withdraw from the asteroid field. The alien formation was collapsing as individual captains made the decision to preserve their vessels rather than continue a battle that had already cost them more ships than they had lost in the previous decade of conquest. Admiral Kethfer must have been receiving similar reports from his own tactical officers, because his expression grew even more grim. Captain Rodriguez, assuming I were to consider a withdrawal from this system, what assurances could you provide regarding future human military actions? None whatsoever, Rodriguez replied with brutal honesty. Humanity doesn't negotiate with species that attempt genocide against our colonies. What I can tell you is that every human military commander in the galaxy is going to study recordings of this battle. They're going to learn from our methods and develop new ways to apply them against alien technology. The truth was both simpler and more complex than Rodriguez was letting on. The Independence's victory had been achieved through months of preparation, detailed intelligence gathering, and modifications that pushed human technology to its absolute limits. Other human ships couldn't simply copy their tactics without similar preparation time and resources. But the psychological effect of this single engagement would ripple through the galaxy in ways that might prove even more valuable than the military victory itself. Admiral, Rodriguez continued, you came here believing that humans were just another primitive species to be exterminated. Instead, you've discovered that we're something your military doctrine never anticipated. We're a species that gets more dangerous when we're outgunned, more creative when we're desperate, and more effective when everyone assumes we should be dead. Admiral Kethvar was quiet for several moments, undoubtedly receiving status reports from his fleet that confirmed what both commanders already knew. The Zephyrian Galactic Armada had suffered its first major defeat in over 2 centuries, and that defeat had come at the hands of a single human vessel using tactics that challenged every assumption about modern space warfare. Captain Rodriguez, the alien admiral finally said, you have given me much to consider. My fleet will withdraw from this system while I consult with my superiors about how to proceed regarding your species. That's probably wise, Rodriguez. Agreed. And Admiral, when you make your report, make sure your superiors understand that what happened here today wasn't luck or accident. It was humans doing what we do best when someone tries to wipe us out. The communication ended, leaving the Bridge of the Independence in relative quiet, except for the steady hum of systems that had been pushed far beyond their design limits. Around them, the remnants of the once mighty Zephyrian Armada began the long process of limping out of human space, carrying with them news that would change the balance of power throughout the galaxy. Rodriguez looked around at his crew, seeing exhaustion mixed with pride in their faces. They had accomplished something that military historians would debate for generations, proving that human ingenuity could triumph over superior technology when applied with sufficient creativity and determination. Well done, everyone, he said. Simply, now let's go home and figure out how to do it again.